Aloha, friends. I'm coming to you live and direct from a maritime hammock nearby, if you live in Northeast Florida, with part 5 of Being in the Way. This one is called The Narrow Gate. This series, Being in the Way, is about the most famous sermon ever preached, the Sermon on the Mount. And the more time I spend with the text, the more I come to realize something that I just had never noticed before. And that is that this teaching is so far really just about one thing expressed in different ways. And that one thing is the one thing, that there's only this one thing happening, and that you're a part of it, and so am I, and so is all of this. Everything belongs when the perspective from which we're viewing everything is the same as Christ's, which is unitive. Last time in part 4, we explored anxiety, not as an unusual disorder, but actually as just the resting condition of the undisciplined mind. Because the mind, the undisciplined mind, you may have noticed, is consistently pulling us into the future with ideas of what might be coming, good, bad, or otherwise, or the alternative, into the past, where we're ruminating and feeling guilt and or relishing the good old days. I read that nostalgia was a diagnosable mental disorder until the 1950s. It's interesting. So the mind, when left unchecked, is just constantly pulling us past, future, and that's normal and it's fine. Except it comes at a cost. You know, the Descartes, I think, therefore I am. There are some completely different conclusions that come out of that statement than the ones we might settle on if just a couple of the words are reversed. I am, therefore I think. When we're one with the mind, there's a cost involved. Something is quietly exchanged. And what is exchanged is the capacity to be here now, to rest in the present moment, to accept life as it is. A couple thousand years ago, some dude named Plutarch said, "To find fault is easy. To do better may be difficult." And that's just asking, like, how does one actually live unanxiously? Not conceptually, but practically. What's an average day lived from the center like? That's what this here little teaching is going to be about. And to answer the question about the average day, here's a little hint. It's going to be unusual and unorthodox and unconventional. At least that's what Jesus seems to say. Here's Matthew 7. He says, "Enter through the narrow gate. For wide is the gate, broad is the road that leads to destruction, and many enter through it. But small is the gate, and narrow is the road that leads to life, and there are only a few that find it." So I don't know about your background, but I grew up in the Baptist church. And there it was explained to me in a variety of ways that the reason that the path is so narrow is because God's moral demands are so exacting. And that keeps the, cost of admission so high that the path is virtually unoccupied, except for by us, and a few approved authors at Zondervan. So everybody's so busy chasing temporary pleasures and addicted to having a good time, that's what I heard, that they refuse to, clean up their act and get on the high road like Jesus wants. This interpretation, application, I suppose, of the text is it's not without merit, but it is missing nuance. In my experience, there's also an absence of a willingness to consider that maybe Jesus' primary concern was not just to get us to quit fooling around and be good boys and good girls. That aim is too low. And on top of that, I gotta tell you, developing an impeccable morality is not the central thesis of the Sermon on the Mount. The organizing principle of the Sermon on the Mount is congruence, oneness, union. And so far in Jesus' teaching, this principle is unfolded like a flower from the single eye to non-judgment, to non-resistance or acceptance, to freedom from anxiety, or we could say undivided perception leads to undivided responses, which lead to undivided attention, which is a new way of being in the world. Now, there's a thousand shades of gray in here, but primarily, at least for the sake of argument here, let's say there are two primary ways of being in this world. Okay. We'll start with the wide way because the wide way is easy. It's automatic. It's the path that we just kind of drift onto. It feels like distraction and reactivity and anxiety, fusion with our thoughts. The ancient mystics had a word for this. They called it logasmoi, mental constructs that carry us away from the here and now. Yeah, and we know what they are. Like, well, what if this happens? And what if that goes wrong? And what do they think of me? And can I get a little bit more? And, you know. But the more we follow those thoughts, the more internally divided we become. That's the trade-off. Not necessarily evil, not necessarily like ill-intentioned, just kind of scattered. But the narrow way, according to Christ, is something totally just different. It's about presence. Do you hear the cardinals in the trees? Did you notice that love bug or something that kept flying directly in front of my face right here between us? It's all perfect. The narrow way is about presence. It's the path of awareness, attention, just small, purposeful choices. Another aspect, I think, of what makes the path narrow is that it contradicts what we've been trained to think that spirituality is. Because it's easy to think about spirituality in terms of like mountaintop experiences, transcendent moments, peak encounters. And Jesus says, your spirituality is actually just like, it's the way that you treat the person who's just right in front of you. We can, some of us, think of spirituality in terms of like accessing hidden knowledge, unlocking the mysteries, cutting our own new key to the kingdom. And then Jesus says, your spirituality is actually the 100 tiny choices that you made today about how to direct your resources and your attention. We can think of spirituality in terms of like healing or influence, changing the world. And Jesus says, your spirituality is your willingness to take an honest look at how you treat yourself and to be open to being just a little bit more gentle, a little bit more loving with yourself, a little bit more forgiving, just learning to forgive yourself and him and her and them, and eventually reality itself for just being what it is. We very easily, naturally think of spirituality as something beyond us, something that we can attain to or reach or arrive or understand. And Jesus says repeatedly, it's actually right here, right now, your ordinary life. The kingdom of heaven is within you. The kingdom of heaven is around you. The time is at hand. Here's Mary Oliver. She writes, instructions for living a life. Pay attention. Be astonished. Tell about it. What's striking is the simplicity. It's just attention. And enough attention reveals, if you look at anything long enough, it becomes astonishing. Like my little nephew got this like miniature microscope for his birthday, and he's like, Uncle Baba, check this out. And he just grabbed like a dish towel from the kitchen and he laid it down. He got the microscope on it. You look at the dish towel and you see a dish towel. You look at it through the microscope and you see all these fibers and all these thick strands that are made up of these smaller individual hairs, which are actually just vibrating particles that are surrounded by a mysterious, unclassifiable matter that we had to go build a giant ring in Switzerland to bang stuff together at super speeds to try to figure out what it is. Like the more closely you inspect something, the more astonishing it becomes. And it's easy to miss the astonishing in our midst when we don't stay long enough in one place to see it, to see. And, our attention is constantly being demanded of us. It's kind of creepy, like how the whole, I heard that our economy at the moment is no longer just a financial one. All these commercials and attempts at, it's an attention economy. So what's being targeted isn't just our wallets anymore. It's where we place our attention. Attention is literally commodified, captured, sold, bought, which only intensifies the already innate human characteristic of moving from one thing to the next. And I'm looking at this for a minute, but I think there's probably something more interesting over that way, perhaps. And when we keep our head on a swivel like that, we miss the depth of what's right in front of us. And so the way that Jesus described and lived and is, it's simply just the refusal to go on living like this. It's the decision to stay. And the path feels narrow because it requires attention in a world designed to scatter it. It's a quiet path through ordinary life. It's narrow, so it can only be walked one step at a time. It is not the wide path that leads to destruction. It is the narrow path. When's the last time you went off the wide path to just chase down a little side trail you found in the forest? This is like one of my favorite hobbies. I just did it just last week in the Ocala forest. I found this little trail and I thought, is that a game trail or is that what is this? And so I went to follow it. And when you do this and you get to a spot where you can't quite tell if you're still on that trail, and then sometimes you can think, was there ever a trail there at all, or did I just make that up? And you have to kind of choose, am I going to continue forward and see if I can continue to see it, or am I going to turn back? It's right? One of the best ways to know for sure that you're on the right path is to realize that you can't actually know for sure. Like St. John of the Cross said, if a man wishes to know for certain the path that he's on, he must close his eyes and walk in the dark. It's a narrow path that leads to a narrow gate. And the thing about the narrow gate is that it's too small for us to fit through with all the stuff that we're carrying around all the time. The thought loops and the resentments and the hopes and the ambitions, attaboys, all of that stuff, important though it may feel, it can't fit through a gate that narrow. Only the truth of who you are can fit through that gate. And the truth is, we don't need to see the whole path. We don't need to figure out the future. We don't need to do something extraordinary. If there's anything we need, it's just to take the next step. And then the next one. With attention, with presence, and in love. And that is plenty. All right. I think that is a wrap. I'm going to go pick my children up from school. They go to school in a forest. Am I living in a dream? Maybe. Love you guys. Thanks for being here. See you soon.